So we're continuing to learn how to free our mind from doubt. So may it be so. So we ended last time with, I have to warn you, this one is a little thick, and the next ones are a little unthick, I think, in terms of the topic. But I find this helpful, and for me, it kind of works. So let's back up to where we were last time. We're working with doubt, and you have the recommendation that we understand the faults of having doubt or any affliction, the characteristics, the remedies, and the causes, and really focusing a lot on being able to recognize things that has a lot to do with the characteristics of it. And so all our afflictions arise due to ignorance. And so once you understand how the afflictions appear to the mind, it's a lot easier to work with them. Some of them are harder to recognize than others. So this is where I think this is helpful, and it's particularly with doubt, as you'll see. So Lama Tsongkhapa explains that there's kind of two ways you can look at this. There's one way you can say is that we have this kind of ignorance where we misapprehend the self. So we think, like they give the example of like if it's dark and there's a coiled rope on the ground, you might think it's a snake. And just as we misapprehend that with this body and mind, that there's a person there. That's one way that we get this idea of a self. And there's a kind of darkness to this ignorance. It prevents us having clarity about things. Another way that he describes it is that there's this view of, they call it the perishing aggregates, or the view of a personal identity. So we have that, and then once we have this in our mind, we start discriminating me and you, self and other. And as soon as you start to do that, as soon as you make that distinction, you start to become attached to what, you're always like this self-preservation that we have. That's why we have that, really, because we have this sense of a self. And so we get attached to things that are going to bring us happiness, and we get hostile to things that are other and are going to, get in our way, impede our happiness. And then he says that as you observe the self, your mind also becomes inflated. And you think that this sense of self is either eternal or it's subject to be annihilated. And that's really, I think, something that we experience a lot in gross ways, but we don't analyze and think about in this way. And so that's where I find this to be helpful, and you'll see as we carry this through. When that happens, you get into trouble. You get into trouble in many ways. And one way you get into trouble is you believe in things, because that's a wrong view, you actually believe in practices, and you lead your life in a way that also gets you into trouble. You have wrong views, and now you're going to have wrong practices that grow out of that. And so that, gets us into situations where we might start to doubt the teacher who taught this view of selflessness. We might start to, or we might think it doesn't even exist. We might have wrong views around that, or related to karma or the Four Noble Truths, the Three Jewels. Or you could become doubtful as, do these things exist? Are they real or not? And so right there, we're kind of wired, in a sense, to have doubts come up. And they actually say, I think, that until you get to a certain level of realization of emptiness, you can't actually get rid of. There's a certain level of doubt that you will have, because you don't know. You don't know that for yourself, and so it's natural to have a doubt. But in that regard, but if you understand this process of the mind, and you understand that it's going to come up, then you can be ready for it. And that's what's the beauty of having these teachings. It's like they've got this cookbook for you there. And you have to find the page that's going to help you today and help you in the long run, too. So this is why Dharmakirti said, once there is a self, there is an idea of another. on behalf of self and other, there's attachment and hostility, and all of the faults come about in association with these. And so that's a pretty subtle thing. I don't work at that level, but I find it helpful to help me understand some of the why fears come up and things like that. I think if you think about this, you can think about examples of things in your life about, why would you fear death, or why would you fear this, or, there's many ways where it kind of comes up. And also you can see how it leads to wrong views, and wrong views are associated with doubt. And this is where I use the verses from Nagarjuna, and I found this kind of to be interesting, because I've kind of sat with these 22 verses for some years now, since 2009, some that I use more consistently. But these, when I read these two, I'm like, oh, this kind of perks my interest, and it helps me to understand what I'm doing wrong, almost, in a way. So these are verses that are very short. He says, by believing that there are results of our actions, one gets rid of wrong views. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. But then he goes on and says, on account of knowing there will definitely be results of our actions, one gets rid of doubt. And that if you're having doubt, and I look at this page on my puja table, I'm like, yeah, I definitely don't know at this moment. You aren't knowing. There's something about having experience with things where you know something so solidly that nobody could shake you from it. And this is the thing with doubt. You have to get to a place where, at least about the things that you can grasp in your practice, that you rely on those things and get some solidity there. And this is where next time we'll talk about how to work with this. And I think Venerable's advice in this book is just so spot on. I was like, wow, it's laid out in such a friendly way, and it's so right there about what to do. So we'll look in the next couple times about different ways to work with doubt. I try to come at things from different angles, because I find that one shoe doesn't fit all states of mind. So it's better to have a bigger toolbox.